Too much of militarization of ocean on behest of the security concerns of superpowers has done all bad to this one of the biggest maritime economic platforms. And with nuclearization of this ocean, worse is still to come. Nuclearization of Indian Ocean is a great power, but it will be at the cost of freedom of navigation in Indian Ocean. Can the world understand the Indian nuclear maneuver? Is abrogation of 370 and 35A in Indian Constitution is the first step towards it? If not, the biggest economic and climatic disaster is coming soon.
Ladies and
that as the situation in Kashmir continues to brew in this region, that there is world notice with regards to this. On this eve, we're taking a subject which is of immense importance. One, of course, the trade connectivity, the economic transformation, and the potential of growth, which is linked to sea lines of communication, and most importantly, the importance of this region towards the rest of the world. It was believed that the new world will be a world for Asia. It will be a world which will link Asia, Africa, Middle East, and also bring forward the less developed countries to a new dawn. It was a dawn which we were expecting. Kashmir issue, widely regarded as a nuclear flashpoint between India and Pakistan, would likely to have severe implications for the Indian Ocean region. But most importantly, it will also affect all those countries which are at this moment utilizing the Indian Ocean for multiple reasons, for trade connectivity, for progress, and for the future. Kashmir is buried alive, and the structures of violence which shrouds these voices of Kashmir are not put in place because of a war, a natural calamity, but these are acts of men and women who represent the Indian Parliament under the Modi's leadership. On 5th August 2019, Kashmiris were ripped off their last standing right, the right to life, in Indian Occupied Kashmir, as India repealed Article 35A of the Indian Constitution and deoperationalized Article 370. These articles had guaranteed the status quo to the Kashmiris as they conferred special status to the Kashmiris for the last 100 years plus. However, what we have seen is, of course, the writing of a new story. With a stroke of a single pen and the consensus of the far right, India's decision was made that Kashmir is to be annexed. So what does this mean for the Indian Ocean? Very simple. Number one, Indian Ocean, world's third largest ocean, consisting 20% of the world's Earth's water, overall occupying around 73.56 million square miles, the future tradeway, the access to global commons, all of this will stand challenged as we deal with the sanguine reality of a conflict in this region. And let me be very clear over here to state that perhaps Kashmir looks at this moment as a landlocked, small issue, which India is trying to suggest. The reality is far from it. It's a bilateral dispute consisting not just merely an issue of territory, but it is the issue of the people of Kashmir. And most importantly, it will also raise bigger questions. If war breaks out, what will be the consequences of the larger nuclear exchange in the Indian Ocean? In this regards, I will only end today's welcome remarks on one thought for everybody in this room, and perhaps also for the rest of the world, which is looking at this situation from a distant eye. And that is the story which I'm going to share with you, is that of a vulture and a child. I'm sure you have seen the story of an African child who was taken and photographed by one of the world's Pulitzer Prize winner photographer. The child is almost dying out of starvation, and there's a vulture walking behind, waiting for that child to die and for that vulture to eat. What's interesting is that that picture showing the helplessness of the child, his strive towards going. Well, this picture was known as the vulture and the girl. Later on, it was found it was the vulture and the boy. This boy actually made it to the UN aid camp where it was actually going. And what's interesting is that he stayed alive for 4 months. But the man who took the picture, he was having a choice at that time. The choice was either to pick up that kid or go back to the copper which was there to pick him up, or actually walk away. He took the picture, and as he was boarding his helicopter, his friends told him, don't pick up the child, he might have Ebola, he might have HIV, and you do not know what kind of diseases he might be carrying. So he left the child. A couple of months later, he got the Pulitzer Prize. But a couple of days later, he committed suicide. And he committed suicide, and in his suicide note, he stated that one of my friends asked me, how many vultures were there? I said, one. He said, wrong. There were two of them. The second one was the one who was taking pictures. So today we have to make a decision as we talk about the economic trade potential of not only Pakistan, India, China, United States, but also of the region to decide, are we going to just take pictures for what's happening in Kashmir and expect Pakistan to handle this on its own, or understand that the consequences of any conflict in the Indian Ocean would not just be Pakistan alone. But more than that, we are here to raise the voice for the unvoiced, the people of Kashmir who have been caged for the 52nd day in Indian Occupied Kashmir without any recourse to life, justice, or the simple right to exist. This has happened as a result of the reorganization bill, which has taken away the right of Kashmiris to be empowered in any form. That means government, schools, hospitals. They are only given one choice. Either you will be Indian citizens, or you'll be facing detention centers, foreign tribunals, and which will decide whether you should be allowed to become state-owned individuals or stateless individuals. This is the reality in which South Asia is existing. Of course, this conference is not just about human rights. We shall be talking during the course of this conference, the nuclearization of the Indian Ocean, what's happening in our oceans from the military term, what will be the implications of Kashmir on our oceans, and most importantly, is the world actually ready to understand that a nuclear war is no one's war. It's a war which will engulf all. So with these sanguine thoughts, I thank you all for your patience, and I hope that you will participate in today's deliberations with the same spirit in which we have tried to put this effort. Please raise your voice for the people who are behind, caged, dead, and buried alive. Please raise your voice for Kashmir. Thank you.
Artifacts operating under challenging conditions, submarines open up new risks areas as well. The sea is the only area where nuclear weapon platforms of adversary states. The deterrence patrol which India carried out in November 2018 had lasted for several weeks, and the same submarine which was used there was compartment damage. So this is a source of concern for everybody who is aware of the dangers of nuclear submarines. I've already mentioned that Pakistan Indian submarine in our waters, and this shows the danger of conflict on sea, and able to detect it, and we exhibited restraint. So had Pakistan not had dangerous consequences for peace and security in the region. So the regime that we have in India, they are following a policy of belligerence, a policy of handedness. Their approach in the domestic politics as well as in the international politics in the region as well as for the world. And this is something which Prime Minister has been highlighting, and we believe that the recent actions in Kashmir have devastated because they are unilateral and illegal actions, and they are aimed at disturbing Pakistan, because these actions are a symbol of the strategic threat that the Indian attitude poses towards the region, and making allegations of cross-border terrorism. This is not a new phenomenon, and this shows the belligerent, irresponsible attitude of the Indian government. I wish you best of luck in your deliberation. Length of the seminar, but I will drop in later in the day. I have a meeting right now after this, so I wish you best of luck.
Our pens are more powerful than their military. Our words have more gravity than their from atrocities and injustice of India. Save Kashmir, save humanity.
No one deserves violence, and same goes for Kashmir. It's high time to stand up for Kashmir and its people, for they
has been stripped away. The human rights abuses in the Indian Occupied Kashmir range from mass killing in judicial and police custody, enforced disappearances, systematic torture, firing pellet guns, chili spray, extrajudicial executions, human shields, rape, sexual abuse, ethnic cleansing, to political repression and denial of the basic fundamental human rights. The term humanitarian intervention is formally used to refer to threat or actual use of force by a state or group of states in the territory of another state with the aim of averting or ending grave human rights abuses. The doctrine has its roots in the Justa Causa doctrine propounded by Vittoria and Hugo Gracious. The League of Nations, however, did not address the issue, whereas the United Nations also established as a universal legal norm the doctrine of non-interference in the domestic jurisdiction of the member states. However, under the Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, it is the duty of the Security Council to determine the existence of any threat to the peace, breach of peace, or act of operation, and to take measures including calling upon its members to complete or partial interruption of the economic relations and of the rail sea, air, postal, telegraphic, radio, and the means of communications, and the surveillance of the diplomatic relations. If these may
two opponents using beyond visual range missiles and AWACS. Due to the definite edge of PF and BVR regime, pilots were seconds short of pressing the trigger that could have seen many more Indian aircraft falling on either side of LOC. However, with a view of not escalating the situation, they were instructed to exercise restraint. If it had happened, Indian Air Force under tremendous simulation would have been forced to react, and the chain of reaction could have led to a bigger conflict. We were actually so close. This is the dynamic of air campaign that quickly escalated to the point of no return. It seemed that Prime Minister Modi was completely blinded to the danger of escalation of hostilities between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. In all likelihood, Modi also believed, or was made to believe, that Pakistan did not have the gumption to take on the might and stamina of Indian military, seemingly buttressed by his madcap media and righteous supporters. Ladies and gentlemen, in all likelihood, today the same kind of a thinking prevails in Indian cabinet. Before moving any further, let's go through the genesis of situation. In the backdrop of Indian repression in Kashmir, 20-year-old Adil Ahmed Dar rammed his explosive-ridden car into the bus laden with a policeman of Central Reserve Police Force. If this was the state of mind of a young boy before 5th August, now when the entire Kashmir is locked, women humiliated by RSS goons, scores of patients dying helplessly, and the ideology is being ridiculed, who would stop reincarnation of hundreds of Adil Ahmed Dar with the pellet gun marks on their faces? While the Kashmiris are seeing all this with their own eyes, the world has been forced to take the notice as well. Al Jazeera reported electric shocks and beating by Indian army. Russian newspapers are reporting that India is using rape as a weapon. Amrit Wilson, in an article published in The Guardian UK, said that rape culture under Narendra Modi government is celebrated by a member of RSS and BJP. Reuters, in an independent investigation, revealed over 10,000 youths are missing, hundreds tortured, and dozens of girls raped by Indian troops. New York Times reports India plans big detention camps for migrant. Muslims are afraid. Palash Ghosh, a Hindu himself, points out Hindu nationalist historical links to Nazism and fascism. BJP Member of Parliament Vikram Singh exposes his true intentions by declaring in address to masses that I will help you buy land, find Kashmiri girl to marry. BJP women wing leader says Hindus should rape Muslim women. She was expelled after a lot of hue and cry for her statement, but the fact is she said it all. Ladies and gentlemen, after the curfew is lifted, the big question, would Kashmiris stay quiet and let this genocide take place? Will there be a repeated Pulwama kind of attacks and the response profile flown by the two air forces with even bigger, larger packages? And then what? Answer to this question has to be found by the world now. For a moment, leave aside the likely reaction shown by the Kashmiri future. Our Prime Minister Imran Khan said that war is not the likely option. Surprisingly, it is the Indian state which is showing eagerness to get into an armed confrontation with Pakistan. Their statement, frenzy to acquire weapon after 5th August, and military provocation are proof of their intention. I'll just explain it. As per India was to occupy Pakistan side of Kashmir. Indian Foreign Minister Jay Shankar said that we will have a physical jurisdiction over Pakistan occupied Kashmir one day. Senior BJP leader Amit Shah declared in Lok Sabha, when I talk about Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan occupied Kashmir and excision are included in it. Incidentally, the same Amit Shah was given top cabinet slot after he declared Muslim as termites. Indian media reports that Army Chief has issued a threat to attack Azad Jammu and Kashmir to fulfill India's next agenda of annexing the entire Himalayan territory. Imran Khan to hand over Pakistan side of Kashmir to India if he wants Pakistan good, says Union Minister Ramdas Athewale. These statements are backed by displaying the latest acquisition of military arsenal and act of provocation at LOC. Now these are the reports after 5th August. Times of India reported India to deploy latest American weapon along China border. Israel completes delivery of first batch of Spice 2000 bombs to India. Indian Air Force gets deadly bunker buster Spice bombs from Israel. Indian Air Force test fired Astra beyond visual range air-to-air missile. DRDO test fired new anti-tank guided missile weapon system. IF technically accept Rafale aircraft. Financial Express reports that Indian Navy to get made in India submarines and frigate next week. And the latest in September, India to spend whooping 130 billion US dollar to modernize forces. The list goes on. Now coming towards military provocation. Indian forces' attempts to deploy heavy artillery was foiled this month. Apart from multiple ceasefire violations in August, on 6 September they attempted on Cham sector, on 9th again Cham, Uri, Chakoti and Pandu sector, 14 September multiple sector, 18 September again Cham and 21 September Kardai sector of Poonch and Uri. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the indicators and pointers that clouds of war are hovering over the region. It is of great concern that Modi's military advisors are unmindful of the fact that grave risk of escalation is inherent in the cavalier use of power, particularly air power, whose most significant attribute is its vast offensive capability. As I stated earlier, that never in the history two such strong air forces were pitched against each other, equipped with state-of-the-art weapons that could wreak havoc in a matter of hours, not days. While the world at large talks about the nuclear holocaust, but they have perhaps less idea that a conventional air campaign causes nearly the same amount of destruction sans radiation. Let me give you a glimpse of that. Both the air forces have bomber attacker that could carry a large number of bunker busters to a long range. Each bomb could weigh 2,000 pounds, and the destruction caused by them are sufficient to raise building, obliterate complete grid station in a single stroke, unleash water from dams, and make the invincible looking bridges fall. Multiply the effect by 100 times which the drone attack created on the oil field in Saudi Arabia. Additionally, both the forces have long-range guided bombs with a range extending 150 kilometers. They can even be lobbed while staying in own territory with the accuracy of targeting through the window of a building. Center of gravity might change as per the dictate of war, however industrial and military complexes are considered very lucrative. The famous Ham-Rong Bridge in Vietnam that consumed few hundred sorties and 7 years to get destroyed because of the bombing inaccuracies would not need just one sortie. With a capacity of launching hundreds of sorties per day, the major portion of industrial complexes in a range could be laid waste, bringing economy to standstill and pushing country back by 40 years. These are not the figment of imagination. Unfortunately, world has been blinded by seeing only one-sided wars for a long time. Since we live in the shadow of nuclear warfare, we must face its probable consequences and be prepared to cope up with potentially gruesome and large-scale destruction. Much has been written about the physical and biological effects of nuclear warfare, but the effect of bombing on the functioning of society, on lives and activities of city dwellers, on the operation of industries, and even on the organization of a nation has largely been neglected. If this destruction of the region is to be avoided, the international community must step in and call on India to lift the ongoing blockade of Indian Occupied Jammu and Kashmir, cease the gross violation of human rights immediately and impunity, hold accountable those responsible for atrocities, allow independent observer to the region, and uphold the right to self-determination of the Kashmiris. There are countless examples when sensing potentially disastrous situation, world powers effectively intervened. Recalling one such event, the year was 1998. After the nuclear test by India and Pakistan, UN Security General intimated to President's Security Council that Indian Prime Minister at that time
got such real consequences. Nonetheless, this is the task given, so I'll endeavor my best to deliberate on that. There is no doubt that since morning we've heard about the importance of the Indian Ocean, We understand that the Indian Ocean is one of the most strategic oceans in the world. Today's world's 70% world trade, largest oil reserves, almost 90% world oil trade is invariably passing through this ocean. Unfortunately, the disturbing factor has been that the New Delhi's political military leadership is of the view that 9 million people of Kashmir can be caged, legally disempowered, and wiped out of their existence in terms of legal terms, and Pakistan, home to 200 million people, one of the most resilient armies in the world, will stand aside as the carnage in Kashmir continues. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a gross misrepresentation of the realities on ground and a misreading of Pakistan's commitment to the defense of the state of Pakistan. Let me state here, for Pakistan, Kashmir is not a territory, not a fight for jurisdiction. It is a people's war for Kashmir, who are still waiting for the partition to complete. Since 9/11, a new counter-terror framework was created, which brought in the entire world to stand against terrorism. It is in the ashes of 9/11 that New Delhi hoped that it could paint just and determined fight of the people of Kashmir for freedom as terrorism. And what we have seen is that, unfortunately, that as 9/11 was a reality, in the case of South Asia, we have seen multiple false flag operations, from Mumbai to actions and acquisitions, the latest one being in Sir Creek. What we have heard repeatedly from Uri to Pulwama has been that all these actions have been conducted by Pakistan or Pakistan-based group, which is furthest from the reality, given the fact that 90% of the evidence which was required just to make a basic claim was never provided. Nevertheless, acquisitions, actions, and physical military action was thought of. Well, the current siege of the 9 million people indicates that it is not terrorism which India has confronted in Kashmir, but a protracted conflict with which the structures of violence can no longer hold down. Henceforth, such extraordinary measures and such extraordinary force. Second assumption, which was built by the military and security establishment in New Delhi, was that as India will increase tension on the line of control, as of now it is believed that last year alone 1,900 line of control violations had occurred, they would be accompanied by a preemptive strike by New Delhi, and Islamabad would not respond. My colleague before me has just very clearly enunciated that, yes, in Pulwama we might have acted with restraint, but in future all such military dispositions would have consequential response from Islamabad. For each such false flag operation, the narrative had always been built around an alleged terrorist attack in India, which was linked to Pakistan. And in this ongoing context, the last endeavor was created to rein in diplomatic economic coercion towards Pakistan, as what we have witnessed till now. But what we have seen is that the reorganizational bill of 2019 is actually indicating that things in Kashmir have not gone the way India had hoped. They need extraordinary measures. They have taken legal action, which is essentially illegal. And what is what's worst is that these people have been made stateless. Secondly, the attempt by the Indians for the surgical strike was met with Pakistani military response for target engagement inside Indian territory at targets of our choice. Though non-military in nature, nonetheless, they were very valid. 27th February 2019 was just a small step towards Pakistan's defense, but the message was clear. That then and now, that no war between India and Pakistan can remain unresponded, limited, no matter how less the threshold of engagement be. Unfortunately, their security, military, and intelligence establishment is still of the view that they will be able to contain the blowback of the carnage in Kashmir, and war in Kashmir will remain limited to Kashmir. Since my talk is to focus on the military implications, let me state it very clearly that the world's and the United States and China, as well as other great powers which believe that this is the region of the future, need to rethink that the economic partners of India who have been trying to believe that this is some kind of a counter-terrorism effort, some kind of a normalization effort by India in Kashmir, is the furthest from reality. Actually, the gravity on ground is quite serious. And Kashmir, is not something which will go unheard forever. If the curfew goes on and continues, Pakistan's red lines will also come closer to the larger scale war between India and Pakistan. The Indian Land Warfare Doctrine of 2018 had argued that information operations will lead the battlefield and the war cycle. But as the practitioners understand, no war, once started, will remain centered to a single domain. It will stretch into domains, land, air, and sea, and beyond. And also, the distress, what we have seen in Kashmir, will not remain limited to Kashmir. So it is the bigger question to understand that no war in the north will remain limited to the north. It will come to the south and it will come to the seas. And if it comes to the seas, of course, the consequences are very vivid and valid. The later half of this conference will be focusing in terms of what is the freedom of navigation, what are the naval consequences, and most importantly, the actual sanguine reality of dealing with a nuclear explosion in the Indian Ocean, and what kind of effects in terms of reality we will be facing. Similarly, if the argument has been made that there is going to be a likely false flag operation, which will be centered on airstrikes or surgical strikes, which will lead to an outbreak of a larger conventional war, as the armored divisions of India, be it in Rajasthan, Punjab, or whether in Multan, Lahore, or Sialkot, will be met unresponded, is of course also a big misrepresentation. Because the reality on ground is that the parity between the forces when it comes to fighting power is pretty efficient, and all the recent crises and the crisis before that have very clearly proved that. Similarly, the idea of capturing any territory in Pakistan or creating a massacre in Kashmir would also be responded, and it would be fraught with high risk, even if it is backed by India's recent and not so recent partners. So I will just like to state clearly here that in any such scenario, India may have the liberty to start the war, but the response and escalation control will remain with Islamabad. In the end, once we talk about the Indian naval options, this is the much talked about partnership which we hear, from Quad to tri-military exercises, to Tiger Triumph. What we hear is that perhaps this is the new dawn which will ensure that no situation in this region goes out of hand, because international partners are there. The message is very simple, and the message is that if it is about people's survival, it is about 9 million people's life and their future, and the fact that they have been made stateless. The emotions, the pressures, and the decisions for the Pakistani military, political, and most importantly, economic leaders would have to be re-channelized in order to understand the reality of sanguine cruelty what we have looking at in Kashmir. Similarly, it is believed that in Pulwama, India had also moved its naval assets. You have seen this morning's speaker talk about the naval submarine which was in our waters. Second much talked about movement of Indian naval vessels had been the Indian aircraft carriers, and the fact that they will be able to move, mobilize, and actually create an effect. The reality is whether they are doing international tri-service exercises or they're having partnerships with multiple other exercise partners, when it comes to war readiness and when it comes to actually carrying out an operation in a single domain, it cannot remain single if you need effectiveness. It cannot remain limited if you want to achieve objectives. And if objectives are to hold Kashmir, let me assure you, no war will ensure for India that that will be guaranteed. In short, it is clear that the combat readiness of the Indian naval vessels may be very good on paper, but in reality, the mobilizational differential, the actual linking and delinking with the other domains of war is not so visible in terms of actually fighting a short war. So if they're planning for a long war, then of course this changes the dimensions altogether. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan believes in strategic stability and importance of peaceful resolutions of dispute. However, we cannot remain oblivious of deterrence patrol of Indian nuclear submarines, Ariane, since November 2018. As it was stated also earlier this morning, that it marks the first actual deployment of ready-to-use nuclear warheads, or the weaponization of space when a missile defense interceptor was used by India to destroy a satellite in low Earth orbit, creating a debris process. This anti-satellite test requires international community's understanding that the technology curve with which India is being aided may be great, may be swift, but it only adds lethality, uncertainty to an already fragile military security environment on ground. In the end, Kashmir will also lead to inevitable consequences of the war in the Indian Ocean, halting all trade and life as we know. As a nuclear war in the ocean will not make it an India-Pakistan war over Kashmir, but a global war with global consequences. It is time that we think that Kashmir is not a counterterrorism challenge, but a threat to international peace and security, which was left as an unfinished part of partition and now requires a final settlement. A final settlement which is not unilaterally enacted or written by India, but a final settlement which would allow to see the realities on ground and also to understand that actually the power differential which the Indian military, Indian naval planners, and Indian air planners believe exists actually does not exist. Had it existed, Pulwama would have not remained limited. We would have seen an actual larger military conflict from New Delhi. So in short, this is the time for us to understand in one line that the military implications for any war in Kashmir will consequentially lead to larger engagement at the military and security level between India and Pakistan. All this is being said at the eve of the UNGA Assembly session to bring the international conscious to the fact that this is not something which can be set aside on Howdy Modi's visit and thinking that if you've got the defense contracts, these defense contracts would ultimately suffice for the deaths of the Kashmiris. It will not, because for 200 million people of Pakistan, it is a matter and it is a survival for the people of Kashmir for which we are fighting. So here the question will be, which army will fight better? In the end, it is said, battles are not won by weapon systems alone. It is always leadership, innovation, and most importantly, the reason why you're fighting that war. And it is the leadership which has shown, not once, not twice, but in all Pakistan-India military security scenarios, that we are determined to fight against oppression, be it against Kashmiris who are inside Indian Occupied Kashmir or in carrying out the defense of the state of Pakistan. With these few words, we hope that we can deliberate a bit more in detail about the realities of the Indian Ocean, the technologies, the oil and gas which is there, economics, but most importantly in the end, the nuclearization of the Indian Ocean. So I thank you all for your patience.
Thank you. We have a short video now, and then we will request the Honorable Minister to deliver his keynote address. And after that, we'll have question-answer session. So can we have that video, please?
Oceans have been playing a pivotal role as trade routes in the history of mankind. And this fact does not change in case of Indian Ocean, which is almost 20% of world's ocean area and connects shores of 3 continents. It has an incredible honor to host 23 of the world's top 100 container ports. 80% of the world's present in Indian Ocean. China's Belt and Road Initiative largely
important issue, the Kashmir crisis, the nuclearization of the Indian Ocean, and the environment safety issues. I would also like to thank the South Asian Strategic Stability Institute for arranging this conference on the Kashmir issue, a topic which is very close to every Pakistani's heart and the Kashmiri people. Nuclearization of the Indian Ocean by New Delhi should also be a serious concern, not only for literal states, but all of the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, Indian unilateral abrogation of Article 370 and 35A of its constitution is an attempt to escape from the just resolution of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir issue. It can also be seen in the context of the tyranny of the majority taking place in India right now. Indian action runs contrary to its long-standing stance of resolving the matter through dialogue and as per United Nations resolutions. Let me also clarify for the record, Kashmir is not a bilateral boundary line dispute between India and Pakistan. Rather, it was taken to United Nations by India in 1948 and remains on the United Nations Security Council agenda for the past 7 decades. It is an international dispute that lies at the heart of all issues in South Asia. This dispute has been left festering for decades, periodically serving as a flashpoint for conflict between India and Pakistan. Hindutva's zealots still romanticize the legacy-based physical boundaries of erstwhile Gupta, Mauryan Empire, and the teaching of Chanakya Kautilya. The abrogation of constitutional rights marks the murder of the right of self-determination of Kashmiris, and India will not get away with this murder. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to highlight some facts that serve as a few glimpses of Indian atrocities in Kashmir since 1989. And I would really urge all my friends here to concentrate on these few facts that I'm about to give. Nearly 100,000 Kashmiris have been martyred by Indian occupied occupation forces. Out of these, over 7,000 persons have been martyred in custody of Indian security forces. Around 110,000 structures have been destroyed. About 23,000 women have been widowed. Nearly 108,000 children have been orphaned. 11,125 women have been molested, raped, or gang raped by Indian occupied forces. More than 7,000 unnamed mass graves have been discovered, with thousands of victims of fake encounters. Indian occupied Kashmiris have mass blinded Kashmiri civilians, including youth, women, and children, by deliberately targeting their eyes with pellet gunshots. As a result, over 10,000 Kashmiris have suffered injuries due to the use of pellet gunshots. 215 young people have been blinded in one eye and 147 have been totally blinded. This number is increasing day by day. As far as the atrocities and human rights abuses are concerned, in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, these have been explicitly confirmed and reported internationally by various institutions and organizations. Kashmiris are facing a worst genocide in human history at the hands of occupied Indian forces and the RSS. It is feared that in the garb of complete media and communication blackout, this shall turn into the worst Muslim cleansing, which is also actually in line with the BJP's 2019 manifesto. Ladies and gentlemen, the hell already let loose upon Kashmiris, Indian racist and fascist government has recently deprived the Kashmiris of their land and identity through the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A. Indian blatant annexation of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, 11 of them to be precise. It breaches international law as well as all bilateral and multilateral agreements on this subject. India has deployed 180,000 additional troops, supplementing over 700,000 already stationed there for over 3 decades. This makes Kashmir the most militarized zone on earth, and it is now turned into the largest prison and concentration camp. Ladies and gentlemen, Kashmiris have been silenced forcefully through increased presence of armed forces, imposition of infinite lockdown and curfew, arrests of Kashmiri political and civilian leaders, media, internet and communications blackout, expelling foreign human rights activists, restrictions on personnel of United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan, suspension of civic services, and increased brutalities amounting to genocide, and general silence of our so-called civilized world. Ladies and gentlemen, India is trying to bandwagon international anti-terror sentiments by labeling an indigenous Kashmiri freedom struggle movement as terrorism, Indian occupation, and the actions are not legitimate under international law. I would like to reiterate again. India, being the biggest terrorist sponsor in South Asia, is trying to run with the hare and hunt with the hound. Commander Kulbhushan Jadhav and many others of his type have been involved in terrorism in Pakistan. Almost all Indian neighbors are victims of its terrorism sponsorship. Ladies and gentlemen, we, Pakistan, firmly stick to our pledge for the peaceful resolution of the Kashmir dispute as per the aspirations of the people of Kashmir in the light of the UN Security Council resolutions. We will continue to highlight internationally the Indian atrocities and violation of basic human rights in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We will continue our political, diplomatic and moral support to the indigenous and legitimate struggle of our Kashmiri brothers and sisters. We will do what it takes in support of Kashmiris. Ladies and gentlemen, diplomacy and political approach should be given priority. The only way forward is to return to politics and diplomacy and to find out a win-win solution through comprehensive dialogue. Pakistan has repeatedly urged India to resume dialogue to resolve all outstanding issues and ensure durable peace in the region. However, India appears to have no interest and takes cover of the terrorism alibi, which is a mutual problem. India rather resorts to the use of threats and bluster. The realpolitik motivated support for India's political and strategic interests in the region feeds the Indian aspirations of projecting its power globally. This makes India more dismissive towards the resolution of outstanding disputes with its neighbors. With a few exceptions, the international community's response to the Indian move of the 5th of August 2019 only vindicates such concerns. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be honest that the international security landscape does not appear good. Strategic stability is being negatively affected at the global and regional levels. While the international community is occupied with all these developments in different places of the world, there have been some recent and grave threats to the strategic stability in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly South Asia, which merit serious attention. The growing provocative doctrines, belligerent rhetoric, aggressive posturing, and introduction of destabilizing weapon system by India is rapidly contributing to strategic instability in South Asia. Pakistan, on the other hand, is committed towards conflict resolution and strategic stability in South Asia. During the February 2019 escalation, which was imposed upon us, Pakistan demonstrated utmost restraint and responsibility. We believe that the only way for Pakistan and India to move forward should be through a dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, the worsening international security situation is rapidly eroding strategic stability at the global and regional levels. India has consistently sought the status and capabilities of a revisionist global power. Hence, it regards domination over its periphery and the entire Indian Ocean region as a necessary prerequisite. Pakistan, again, on the other hand, has no such ambitions. Our sole objective has been to defend ourselves and to deter all forms of aggression. Pakistan is committed to the objectives of strategic stability in South Asia. It believes that the only way forward for both Pakistan and India is to agree on measures for strategic restraint. This can only be achieved through a dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in pursuit of a peaceful environment conducive to the socio-economic development and welfare of our people. Pakistan has no intention or desire to engage in an arms race with India. or anyone else in the region. India's massive acquisition of conventional arms coupled with offensive doctrines, expansion of strategic assets including nuclear submarines, etc., are developments with serious security implications for Pakistan. Recent worrisome developments in our region are: India conducted the first deterrence patrol of its nuclear submarine Ariant in early November 2018. This development marks the first actual deployment of a ready-to-use nuclear warhead by an Indian Ocean littoral state. As such, it should be a matter of concern for the international community at large. India is also contributing to the weaponization of outer space. In March 2019, it used a missile defense interceptor to destroy a satellite in a low Earth orbit and creating debris in the process. This anti-satellite AS-80 test once again highlights our concerns on the military spin-offs of high technology trade with India, while disregarding proliferation concerns, which also undermines regional stability. Ladies and gentlemen, India has been seeking to create space for war under a nuclear overhang, as it falsely believes that it can control the intensity of the conflict by punishing Pakistan, short of a point where Pakistan could resort to using nuclear weapons. The recent escalation in February 2019, which was imposed by us on India during the Kashmir crisis, is reflective of this Indian mindset and highlights their foolish and dangerous pursuit of a new normal. As a peace-loving country, Pakistan is committed to peaceful and normal relations in its neighborhood. However, we would also like to make it absolutely clear that we are equally determined to frustrate any attempt to create a so-called new normal. During the Kashmir crisis in February 2019, Pakistan demonstrated responsible behavior and did not indulge in any nuclear saber-rattling. On the other hand, India deployed missiles and nuclear submarines during the crisis. Prime Minister Modi invoked nuclear threats also during his election campaign. Such rhetoric, with complete disregard to its effects on strategic stability in South Asia, was extremely regrettable. It defied the norms of responsible nuclear behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, India historically claims Indian Ocean as an Indian lake and seeks to become a leading power in the Indian Ocean. Primarily, Indian Ocean belongs to its littoral states and other seafaring nations. Presence of nuclear platforms in the Indian Ocean precludes just and equitable access to this global common. Whereas India, with the support of global powers, is in a process to build its maritime power and is being projected as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also point out that the Indian Ocean is not India's ocean. It is a common heritage of littoral and dependent states. Unfortunately, India has nuclearized this common heritage, endangering peace, stability, and prosperity. Indian Ocean is currently experiencing a major shift in the distribution of power and rearrangement of strategic priorities. While the global economic center of gravity is shifting from Atlantic to Asia Pacific, the Indian Ocean region has become a hotbed of geopolitical competition. Introduction of sea-based nuclear capabilities by India is an extraordinary development for littoral states of the Indian Ocean and has a potential to trigger nuclear arms race in the region. India was the first to introduce nuclear weapons in South Asia in 1974, and again the first to nuclearize the Indian Ocean region. India exclusively bears the responsibility of nuclearizing the Indian Ocean by building a continuous at-sea nuclear deterrence capability. Reinforcement of nuclear deterrence at sea by India exacerbates security dilemma that is likely to permeate insecurity among Indian Ocean's rim countries, evoking similar responses. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the collective responsibility of the international community to preserve this common heritage and save the nuclearization of the Indian Ocean region by India to avoid a resultant environmental and arms race catastrophe. I thank you again for a patient hearing. Kashmir banega Pakistan, Pakistan Zindabad. Capabilities. So let me say that categorically that the budget was designed in such a way, with the Pulwama incident in our background, with the Modi doctrine in front of us and his rhetoric in front of us. So the economic austerity budget that we presented, that did freeze the military expenditure for 1 year, but that was largely done by the help and the cooperation of the military in terms of the freezing of the pay scales and the limiting of the pay scales of its officers. Exactly the same way that the civil government did that, the federal government did that. So the defense capabilities of Pakistan are in no way compromised. The budget was crafted very carefully in that respect because we understood the current security dimension.
Issues of regional security and mutual relations. Today, I'm supposed to speak about evolving security answer to the questions during my words. First, why we cannot make a European-style security environment in our region. Second, what are the fundamental obstacles for a permanent and enduring peace in the region? Third, what effects these obstacles have on our mutual relations? For answering the first question, I am on the view that our region is the cradle of fundamental problems, that most of them are resulted from misinterpretation and historic mistrusts. The desire for cooperation, not important in which field, exists among our countries, but this willingness faces many impediments. Sanctions, external interference, fabricated crises, especially terroristic ones that cause misunderstanding and mistrust, lack of self-confidence in our countries to rely just on each other's capabilities, not having structural complementary infrastructures. For the second question, some impediments like peace in Afghanistan, security challenges in South Asia, historical rivalries between Muslim countries, refugee crisis, drug smuggling, and human trafficking must be beared in mind. The more we be able to work together for the betterment of our region, the less our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan need extra regional powers to help them. International double standard in defining terrorism is the other element that has forced us to be suspicious to each other. For example, the United States decision in foreign terrorist calling of IRGC, that is a national defense force in Iran, will make further military and intelligence cooperation between our countries more difficult. Or in other case, unclear strategy for the peace and tranquility in Afghanistan has made everything to hang in balance. So, interventionism and unilateralism is another problem of our region that prevents the countries to link horns for regional progress. Now we can better answer to this question, that what effects these obstacles have on our mutual relations. For answering this question, I will provide some examples to materialize the issues under two categories: common concerns and common interests. It is evident to all that Iran and Pakistan, they are common in everything. Something that maybe the top of them as a great concerns The both countries located in the transit line of the drug trafficking and human trafficking. Two countries exposed to the despicable and the heinous phenomenon of terror. They both has the same view for the foreign interference in our region and the lack of cooperation and interaction among the Muslim countries. And regarding the common interest that the both countries should try to work better and faster than the past. We have a lot of capabilities regarding to the more communication in sea and some other channels. And also it is something that we should try to more cooperation in aviation and also sea and shipment. And regarding to the trade and business, the two countries enjoys from the complementary economy to each other, everything that the Pakistani and the products we needed, and also identically Iranian products in Pakistan, the top of them the energy. Iran is the second largest in the world of the gas and energy sources. We are able to give everything that our brotherly country Pakistan needs. But it is something that's under some exogenous reasons as the sanction on some other interference. We are not able to do this. Anybody knows that the Iranian IP can change the face of the economy of the country of Pakistan as a raw material for many, many branches of industry and creating a lot of jobs for this country that enjoys from the youngsters more than 60%. And so one of the top priorities of any government in Pakistan is the creation of the jobs for the jobless people and the youngsters that they are looking for the better life in their better life. And so the power transmit that right now the current is not so more 104 megawatts that we are able to promote these to 3,000 and more. But it needs to some taking step in the Pakistan areas that we are looking for that. We're talking about the both sides for Iranian support for that we be able to do this. And so as a conclusion, EU was bestowed success because of the linkages in 4 main areas. These areas are economy, communication, security, and culture. If we want to construct a better future for our next generations, we need to work more on these 4 areas. We face many obstacles in improving our regional convergences. To battle these impediments, we need to be more resilient, self-reliant, and diligent. We are under the territorial, cultural, cyber, and economic invasions. The adversaries are privileged our internal rifts between our countries, so they can further run their territorial desires in the region. In bilateral area, as I said and mentioned, Iran and Pakistan must do their level best to first stave off any war in the region. Our region has already satiated of conflicts, and our trouble-stricken countries need more sympathy and empathy that rivalry and locked horns. If today we start listening to unilateral sanction, tomorrow we should succumb to further bully approaches. But if we today show more pluck in standing up the bullies, we can see a more courageous and self-reliant generations after us. Second, Iran and Pakistan need to prioritize regional and neighborhood cooperation to other forms and options to dealing their problems. Thank you to all of you for listening.
Thank you, Excellency, for bringing reality to home to everybody sitting in this hall and aspirations of people of Kashmir. So we value your thoughts on peace and stability in Pakistan and the offer for help to Pakistan in meeting its energy demands and other cooperation. And the hearts of the people of two countries beat together. And hopefully it will be such that we can cooperate further. So ladies and gentlemen, we have about 15 answers. We had covered a very diverse, and Raza, I'm not inclined to give you the floor. If you have 10 seconds and question, please, okay? So we can start with you. Only question.